Unaware his wife owned the construction company, signing his $9 billion deal, husband dragged pregnant wife in front of his family. To please them, what she did shocked them all. He didn't just embarrass her. He wrapped his fingers around his pregnant wife's wrist in the middle of his parents' shining dining room, dragged her to her feet like a prop, and forced her to thank the very people laughing at her. Hours earlier, in a quiet suburban kitchen, Clara Miller had executed an action that would change everything. She sat in front of her laptop, 6 months pregnant, heart racing as she clicked authorize on her secure CEO portal. The action released the final signature on a contract worth $9 billion. At the top of the secure document, a logo glowed. Greystone Construction's CEO, Clara Gray. Her maiden name, the name her husband, in his blinding ambition, never bothered to look for. To Daniel Miller, she was just the obedient wife helping with paperwork while he chased his dream. He bragged about finally landing his $9 billion construction bid, a project funded and controlled by Greystone. He talked about how his parents would be proud and told Clara to smile and stand beside him at dinner so he could look like the perfect man. That night, under crystal chandeliers and judgmental stares, his mother mocked Clara for working. His family laughed at her emotions, and Daniel chose his image over her dignity. He dragged her in front of them to prove he was in control. What he didn't know was this: the deal that was supposed to crown him was signed with her company. The construction firm he worshipped, the contract holding his entire future, all of it sat quietly in the hands of the woman he humiliated. This isn't just a story about a man trying to impress his family. It's about what happens when the woman everyone underestimates decides she's done being silent. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it's like letting Clara's voice sink back beneath their laughter. When you click that button, you stand with every quiet wife, every unseen builder, every woman who chose truth over pride. Please, subscribe now and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The rhythmic thud-thud of a hammer echoed faintly from a nearby construction site, breaking the silence inside the Miller home. Clara Miller flinched. Her heart raced as if the sound had struck her own chest. She blinked at the bright screen of her laptop, not at contracts, but at a secure digital authorization portal. Lines of code, financial checksums, and a final digital signature prompt glowed in the half-light of dawn. Her hand, slightly swollen from pregnancy, hovered over the mouse, trembling between exhaustion and resolve. Then, with one final click, she whispered to herself, "Signature authorized. Contract released." The digital handshake completed in cyberspace. On the top of the finalized document, now visible to all parties, glowed a golden emblem. Greystone Construction's CEO, Clara Gray. Her maiden name, her secret. The screen's reflection flickered across her eyes. Behind her calm face was a woman holding two worlds apart: the world of Clara Gray, the powerful businesswoman who had grown her father's legacy into a multi-billion-dollar company, and Clara Miller, the quiet wife who supported her husband's dream. She leaned back, breathing out slowly. "He'll never even look," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Clara Miller, 32, had always been the kind of woman who worked in silence. She was 6 months pregnant now, graceful but visibly tired, a hand resting protectively on her belly. The faint morning light painted soft lines around her face, showing both youth and endurance, the look of someone who had fought to hold everything together for far too long. 10 years ago, she was Clara Gray, the daughter of a legendary architect and developer. When her father passed away unexpectedly, he left her a significant inheritance and a small but brilliant firm, along with one message: don't build for fame, build something that lasts. She had taken those words literally. When Daniel's first company collapsed under debt, Clara didn't complain. She'd already been quietly growing her own firm. She used her resources to save him, restructuring his debts under a shell corporation. She believed in his dream even when no one else did. But what she didn't tell him was that her firm, Greystone Constructions, had become an industry titan. She told herself it was just insurance, in case Daniel's ambitions went too far. She never imagined it would one day become the foundation of an empire. The kitchen door opened. Daniel Miller walked in, tall, charming, 35, dressed in an expensive navy suit. His energy filled the room before his voice even did. "Morning, babe," he said, loosening his tie slightly as he reached for the coffee she had already poured for him. Guess who's about to land the biggest deal of his career? Clara smiled softly, managing her expression. The Greystone Project, right? Daniel grinned, the kind of grin that loved mirrors more than people. Yep, now that they've signed off, we're untouchable. A $9 billion project, Clara. $9 billion. Miller Enterprises is the lead contractor. That's legacy money. He sipped his coffee, pacing like a man rehearsing victory speeches. This is what I've been working for. Everyone will finally see that I'm not just some small-town builder. Clara's eyes followed him, the man she once adored for his ambition. But ambition had slowly turned into obsession. She set her laptop lid down gently, hiding the glowing portal. I'm happy for you, Daniel. He leaned in, brushed her cheek with a distracted kiss. When I win, we both win, babe. His words were automatic now, spoken without feeling. Clara's phone buzzed on the table. She reached for it quickly before Daniel could glance over. Text from Maya, Assistant Greystone HQ. Still hiding your name from him? Her thumb hesitated over the keyboard. Then she typed, he thinks I'm just his paperwork girl. He's so focused on the Greystone brand, he hasn't even looked at the CEO's name on the prelims. Let him shine a little longer. She looked at Daniel, who was now tightening his tie in the reflection of the window, already talking about the press conference, about his parents' pride, about success finally proving his worth. For a moment, she wanted to tell him everything that his dream deal was her company's project, that the name Greystone wasn't some faceless brand but a life she had built behind the scenes so he could have his spotlight. But she stayed quiet. She'd learned long ago that silence had more power than shouting. A soft ping sounded from her. Laptop and incoming confirmation email. Clara's gaze darted to the screen. Subject: Final agreement. Greystone D. Miller Enterprises. Contract confirmed. Her heart jumped. It was done. Daniel turned toward her, eyes gleaming with pride. They confirmed it? Clara forced a small smile. Yes, you did it. He laughed, running his hands through his hair. No, we did it. You'll see. Honey, once my family sees this deal, they'll finally respect us. The word family made Clara's stomach tighten. His parents had never truly accepted her. They saw her as the girl with no name, a quiet wife unfit for their ambitious son. And Daniel still wanted their approval more than he wanted her peace. She shut her laptop slowly and stared out the window, watching sunlight spill across the garden. For a moment, peace tried to find her, but her mind was restless. She remembered her father's last words again, build something that lasts. And she wondered, almost sadly, if her marriage ever would. Daniel grabbed his car keys, talking as he headed for the door. Dinner at my parents' tonight. Big announcement. Don't be late, okay? She nodded, forcing a smile. Of course. As the door slammed behind him, silence returned thick, heavy, echoing off the walls. Clara placed a gentle hand on her stomach. One day, you'll know the truth, she whispered to her unborn child. Your mother didn't just stand beside him, she built the ground he's walking on. Her phone buzzed again, another message from her assistant. Board asking if we should reveal ownership on the deal documents. Clara's fingers hovered above the screen. Then with quiet certainty, she typed back, no, not yet. She leaned back, closed her eyes for a moment, and let out a slow, tired sigh. Outside, the faint rumble of thunder rolled in the distance, soft but steady, like a warning. She didn't know yet, but that dinner. Daniel spoke of the one meant to impress his family, would shatter everything she'd built in silence. The roar of laughter hit Clara the moment she stepped through the polished mahogany doors. It wasn't warm laughter, it was sharp, echoing, judgmental. The Miller family dining room shimmered with wealth. Golden chandeliers, silk curtains, and a dining table that stretched farther than most people's living rooms. Every detail screamed of status. But tonight, beneath all the luxury, something uglier lingered: pride. Clara tightened her grip on her clutch purse as Daniel let her in, his hand firm against her back. His fingers pressed harder than usual, guiding her like a performer onto a stage she hadn't agreed to stand on. Smile, he whispered through clenched teeth. They're already watching. She obeyed. She always did. At the head of the table sat Evelyn Miller, Daniel's mother perfectly styled hair, diamond necklace catching every flicker of light. Beside her, Daniel's father, Richard Miller, scrolled through his phone, uninterested but judgmental in silence. Around them sat Daniel's siblings and their spouses, dressed like models for success. "Ah, the happy couple," Evelyn exclaimed, voice dripping with false warmth. "Daniel, dear, you look radiant. And Clara," her eyes trailed over the swell of Clara's stomach, "still keeping busy with your little projects, I hear?" "Yes, ma'am," Clara said quietly. "Just wrapping up a few things from home." Evelyn's smile tightened. "Projects? How lovely. I just hope you're not stressing yourself, dear. It's not good for the baby, or for Daniel's focus. A man needs support, not distraction." Soft chuckles followed. Daniel laughed too loud, too forced. He pulled Clara closer to his chair, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "She gets restless if she doesn't stay busy. You know how pregnancy hormones can make women emotional." The family laughed again, louder this time. Clara's lips trembled, but she hid it by reaching for her glass of water. Her hands shook slightly, the ice cubes clinking. "Careful, darling," Evelyn teased. "Wouldn't want another mess on the table, would we?" Daniel chuckled again, not with her, but at her. Clara froze. Her stomach tightened as their laughter filled the room. She wasn't just a guest anymore, she was the evening's amusement. The meal arrived. Roasted duck, mashed potatoes, and an air so thick with arrogance she could barely breathe. Daniel's brother leaned forward, smirking. "So, Clara, any big plans for after the baby? Or will you finally give our boy here a break from your work life?" Daniel grinned nervously. "She's cutting back. Right, honey?" Clara looked up at him. "I'm doing my best to balance things." Evelyn's silverware clinked against her plate. "Balance?" she said, voice sharp as glass. "A wife's balance comes from supporting her husband. Daniel's about to land a $9 billion deal. You should be home ensuring his peace, not dabbling in spreadsheets." Clara's throat tightened. She tried to speak, but her voice caught. Evelyn leaned forward, smiling that cold, rehearsed smile. "You're carrying his child, dear, not his workload." The table erupted in laughter again, but Daniel's face flickered between discomfort and pride. Pride won. He laughed with them. That laugh cracked something inside Clara. "Enough," Evelyn said suddenly, waving her fork. "Daniel, you spoil her too much. She needs to learn her place. A man can't lead a family when his wife doesn't respect the order of things." Daniel stiffened. His eyes darted toward his parents. Their approval was everything to him. He saw his mother's look, the one that still made him feel like a failing child. Approval. He needed her approval now. "Mom, please," but Evelyn interrupted. "You're making excuses again. No wonder she's so quiet. You've forgotten who you are, Daniel." A beat of silence. Then Daniel stood, his voice shaky but loud. "Clara, stand up." She blinked, confused. "What?" He reached down, wrapped his fingers around her wrist, and pulled her up from her chair. The scrape of the chair legs against marble echoed painfully. Daniel turned to his family with a nervous smile. "See? She's fine. She respects me. Don't you, Clara?" The whole room fell silent, all eyes on her. Clara's breath hitched, her face flushed with humiliation. One hand instinctively covered her belly, the other trembling in Daniel's grasp. "Yes," she whispered, barely audible. "I respect you." Evelyn smiled, satisfied. "Good girl." Laughter resumed, smug, dismissive. Clara sat back down slowly, her wrist aching where he'd gripped her. She reached for her napkin to hide the tears threatening to fall. Daniel exhaled, finally relaxed, basking in his family's approving nods. The dinner dragged on, each word another knife. Daniel's father praised his son's ambition. His siblings toasted to his upcoming partnership with Greystone. No one mentioned Clara again. She felt invisible until her phone, hidden in her lap, vibrated softly. She glanced down. Notification. Greystone Miller Enterprises contract. Signed. $9 billion confirmed. Her eyes widened, catching the faint glow of her name, Clara Gray. Her pulse steadied. The room's noise faded into a dull hum. For the first time all evening, her tears stopped. She placed the phone face down on the table, her expression unreadable. Daniel noticed the shift and frowned slightly, but she just smiled faintly and said, Congratulations, Daniel. Looks like your deal came through. He grinned proudly. Of course it did. Greystone knows a good partner when they see one. Her voice softened. Yes, they really do. He didn't hear the quiet edge in her tone. No one did. As dessert arrived, the chandelier above them flickered once, twice, then dimmed for a heartbeat before glowing again. Evelyn laughed lightly. Old wiring. Daniel, you need to get that fixed before your next event. Daniel nodded. I'll handle it, Mom. But Clara's gaze lingered on the light, flickering just enough to feel like a warning. She placed a hand on her belly again, whispering softly to herself so no one could hear. They'll see what real foundations are built on. And as Daniel's laughter filled the air, she already knew the next time they sat across a table, it wouldn't be for dinner. It would be for divorce. The front door slammed so hard that the picture frames on the hallway wall rattled. Daniel stormed in, his footsteps pounding across the polished wooden floor like thunder. His face was tight with anger, eyes burning with humiliation still fresh from dinner. My parents were right, you embarrassed me, he roared, throwing his keys on the counter so hard they slid across and hit the wall. Clara flinched. She had been sitting on the sofa, still in her dinner dress, her hands resting on her belly. Her shoulders trembled, not from fear but from the weight of holding everything inside for too long. Daniel, she said softly. I stood there, pregnant, while your family laughed at me. You didn't say a word. You dragged me in front of them. He cut her off, voice rising again. Because you don't know how to behave around them. You talk too little. You act too simple. You'll ruin my image, Clara. You never fit in. Her eyes glistened. Your image? Daniel, I've done everything for you. I built our life from the ground. Every contract, every connection you. Daniel slammed his hand on the table, shaking the vase beside it. Then build your own. Because we're done. The words struck her like a physical blow. Silence filled the room. Only the faint hum of the bong, refrigerator, and the distant sound of wind outside remained. She stared at him, her lips parting slightly, trying to find words but none came. Daniel turned, grabbed a brown folder from his briefcase, and threw it onto the table. Papers spilled across the surface, legal papers, official seals, and a final signature page. Sign it, he said coldly. It's a marital settlement agreement. My lawyer drafted it weeks ago. Her knees felt weak. She steadied herself against the armrest. You already planned this? He straightened his tie, voice calm now, almost too calm. My family was right. You're not good for my reputation. You hold me back. People see you and wonder why I married below my level. Her voice cracked. Below your Daniel. I'm your wife. He looked at her like she was a stranger. Not for long. Clara's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. You're divorcing me while I'm pregnant? It's better this way, he said simply. Vanessa understands my world. She knows how to be seen, how to stand beside me without making me look small. At that name, Vanessa, something inside Clara went still. She had suspected it, the texts he hid, the late-night calls, the perfume that wasn't hers, but hearing him say it aloud still felt like glass shattering inside her chest. She stood up slowly, her face pale but composed. You've been planning this? You waited until I gave you what you wanted, the deal, the family's approval, and now you're throwing me away. Daniel picked up a pen from the table and tossed it in front of her. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Just sign the settlement, Clara. Her trembling hand reached for the papers. She stared down at them. Marital settlement agreement. Miller v. Miller. His signature was already there, bold and confident. For a long moment she didn't move. Then she looked up at him, her voice calm, steady, almost frighteningly quiet. Do you remember what you said the day you proposed to me? Daniel frowned. What does that matter now? You said, you're my foundation. She gave a sad, broken smile. Congratulations, Daniel. You just divorced your foundation. And then, with slow, deliberate precision, she signed her name. The pen scratched against the paper, marking her agreement to the dissolution of years of devotion. Daniel exhaled, almost relieved, and grabbed the folder. My lawyer will file it in the morning. She said nothing. She only watched as he walked toward the door, his back turned to her, already reaching for his phone, probably to call Vanessa. When the door slammed behind him, the silence returned, but it was no longer heavy. It was hollow. empty. Clara sank into the chair, her hand pressing against her belly. For the first time that night, tears slid down her cheeks. She didn't sob, didn't speak, just breathed slowly, forcing herself not to break. Across the table, the vase he had hit earlier tilted, the stem of a white rose dipping over the edge, one petal falling soundlessly to the floor. She picked up the fallen petal and whispered, "You'll never know what you just lost." Then, she reached for her phone. Her thumb hovered over one contact, Michael Gray, lawyer. She opened a new message and typed, "It's time. He served me. File our own petition. The gloves are off." She didn't hit send yet. She just stared at the screen for a long time, as if weighing the moment. Outside, thunder rumbled again, echoing softly through the quiet house, the same sound that had whispered through the morning when she finalized the contract. She didn't know it yet, but the next time Daniel would see her, it wouldn't be in their home, it would be across a boardroom table, where his empire would begin to crumble. The sound of popping champagne shattered the morning calm. Golden liquid spilled over. The rim of the crystal flute, as Vanessa Moore, sleek, confident, 30, and sharply dressed, laughed softly, her red nails glinting under the office light. "Finally free from her?" she teased, pouring a second glass and handing it to Daniel. Daniel leaned back in his leather chair, the city skyline gleaming behind him through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He looked rested, almost reborn. The storm of last night seemed to have washed every trace of guilt from his face. "She signed the settlement last night," he said with a grin. "Clean break." Vanessa raised her glass, eyes glinting. "Your parents will be thrilled." "They already are," he said, smirking. "My mother called this morning, said it's about time I stopped letting pity run my marriage." Vanessa gave a low laugh. "Well, cheers to your new empire, Mr. Miller." Their glasses clinked. He watched her as she took a slow sip. Everything about Vanessa was polished, intentional. Her voice carried confidence. Her walk screamed control. She was nothing like Clara, or at least that's what he told himself. Vanessa Moore wasn't just Daniel's mistress. She was also his PR manager, the woman who managed his image, crafted his interviews, and whispered his talking points before meetings. She knew exactly what to say to stroke his ego, and Daniel had grown addicted to that validation. She sat on the edge of his desk, crossing her legs. "You should have done this months ago," she said, swirling her glass. "Clara never understood your vision. She didn't fit your brand." Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I tried to make her part of it, but she was too quiet. Too small town." Vanessa smiled. "Now you can finally be who you're meant to be." Her tone was honeyed, but there was steel underneath it. She saw Daniel as a project, a man she could shape, elevate, and maybe even control. Daniel's phone buzzed on the desk, lighting up between them. Missed call. Greystone HQ. C. Gray. He frowned, confused for a split second. C. Gray. Must be the CEO's assistant. Probably just dotting I's. "I'll let my team handle it." Vanessa cocked her head, waving a dismissive hand. "Let it be. All communication goes through legal now. You're the new partner, not the help. They should be calling you Mr. Miller." She reached across the desk, sliding his phone away, and leaned closer. "Forget them, baby. The future's ours." He smiled, letting himself be pulled into her charm. "You're right." Their lips met in a slow, calculated kiss, more about power than affection. When the kiss broke, Vanessa brushed a wrinkle from his shirt and whispered, "The world's watching you now, Daniel. Greystone, the investors, your family. Don't give them any reason to doubt you." Daniel chuckled. "They'll see what real leadership looks like. No one builds an empire like I do." Vanessa stood, smoothing her dress. "Then start acting like it." She walked toward the window, the city reflecting against the glass like a mirror of their ambition. "Your press conference with Greystone is tomorrow. Make it count." Daniel grinned. "I always do." He didn't notice the faint unease that crossed her face as she checked her tablet, an unread message flashing briefly. From Greystone HQ, attention. CEO Clara Gray. She quickly closed it before Daniel could see. For a moment, after Vanessa left, Daniel sat in silence. He turned his chair to face the window, staring out at the skyline, the weight of self-satisfaction wrapping around him like armor. He had everything: the woman, the power, the deal. Or so he believed. He picked up his phone again, scrolling past the missed call notification. C. Gray. The name meant nothing to him. He shrugged it off and deleted it without a second thought. Across the city, Clara sat in her office, the real CEO of Greystone, watching the same sunrise, through glass walls of her own. She was quiet, calm, and deadly focused. Her phone chimed once. Michael, lawyer. He's celebrating. Perfect timing for the next step. She typed back slowly. Let him enjoy his illusion a little longer. Her reflection in the glass looked almost serene, but her eyes carried a storm. Back in Daniel's office, he poured himself another glass of champagne and raised it lazily to the air. To the future, he muttered, smiling at his own reflection in the window. The faint sound of thunder rolled again, low and distant, the same storm Clara had heard the night before. What Daniel didn't know was that the future he toasted to was already owned by the woman he had just erased from his life. The sound of rain striking glass filled the air like a slow drumbeat. Inside the boardroom of Greystone Constructions, Clara sat at the head of the long oak table, her reflection faint in the window behind her. Her hair was pulled back, her expression calm, but her eyes told another story. They were sharp now, no longer soft with love or patience. Across from her sat Michael Ross, 40, her lawyer and oldest friend. He was tall, quiet, and known for his precision. Unlike most lawyers, Michael didn't speak unless every word carried purpose. He had represented Clara since the beginning, from the first contract Greystone ever signed to the empire it had become. He placed a thick folder on the table and pushed it toward her. Clause 17, he said, his voice steady. It gives us full authority to terminate the deal if Miller breaches ethical standards, and thanks to his own family, we have cause. Clara looked up, her expression questioning. What do you mean? Michael tapped his tablet. His sister-in-law. She was so proud of Daniel putting his wife in her place that she posted a video of the incident to her private social media story. One of my investigators flagged it. We have the footage, Clara. It's time-stamped. It's indefensible. We can end this today. Clara didn't speak right away. Her fingers brushed the edge of the folder. She stared at the legal text but didn't read it. Her mind was somewhere else, replaying that dinner. The laughter, the stares, Daniel's hand gripping her arm as his family watched. Her heart tightened, but her face didn't change. He's about to sign the deal that will crown him, she said quietly. Let's wait until every pen stroke is dry. Michael leaned back, studying her expression. You want to let him believe he's won? Clara nodded once. That's the point. She stood and walked to the window. The city looked blurred through the rain, skyscrapers fading into the mist. Her reflection merged with the skyline, strong but distant. For a moment, she wasn't the CEO of a billion-dollar company. She was the same young woman who once stood beside Daniel, believing love and sacrifice could build an empire. Her voice softened. My father used to say, never build on arrogance, build on truth. Michael smiled faintly. He was a wise man. He was, she said, eyes still on the rain. When Daniel's company failed years ago, I thought I was helping rebuild his dream. But all I did was give him my blueprint, and he turned it into a mirror for his ego. Michael opened his briefcase and took out 2 documents, the contract termination agreement and the final divorce decree. He laid them side by side. One ends the business, he said quietly. The other ends the man. Clara looked down at both. The room went silent, except for the rain. Her wedding photo sat on the corner of the desk, a younger Clara and Daniel, smiling under a canopy of flowers. The memory felt foreign now, like a picture from someone else's life. She picked up the frame, stared at it for a long moment, then turned it face down on the table. Michael watched her, his expression unreadable. You know, once this is done, there's no going back. His company will crumble. His family will turn on him. She nodded. Then maybe he'll understand what it feels like to lose everything you built for someone else. Her tone wasn't angry. It was controlled, the calm of someone who had stopped asking why and started deciding how. Clara took a deep breath, picked up her pen, and signed the divorce finalization document first. The ink flowed smoothly, her hand steady. Then, without hesitation, she placed her initials beside the Clause 17 authorization. The sound of the pen against paper was soft, but it carried the weight of thunder. Michael gathered the documents carefully, sliding them back into his case. He'll never see it coming. Clara gave a small, cold smile. That's exactly why it will work. She walked back to the window, watching the rain pour harder. He took away my name, my dignity, and thought I'd fade. But he forgot something. Michael raised an eyebrow. What's that? Clara turned slightly, her reflection splitting between shadow and light. Greystone doesn't build for men like him. We build what lasts. The lightning outside flashed, lighting her face for a brief moment, fierce, unbroken, resolute. Michael stood, closing his briefcase before heading toward the door. I'll prepare the final notice. It'll be ready for the press conference. Clara nodded. Perfect timing. When he left, the silence returned, heavy and alive. She turned her phone screen on. A missed call notification glowed faintly. Daniel Miller, 1 missed call. She stared at it, her thumb hovering over the delete icon. Then slowly, she pressed it. Move on, she whispered. Outside, thunder rolled again, louder this time. The storm was no longer just rain, it was building into something fierce. Foreshadowing line. By the time the storm cleared, Daniel would stand in the same rain, but this time, he wouldn't know which foundation beneath him was about to collapse. The cameras flashed like lightning as Daniel Miller stepped onto the red carpet, Vanessa on his arm. Her sequin gown shimmered under the golden light, every sparkle announcing her arrival like a statement of victory. Daniel's suit was crisp, his smile wide and practiced the face of success. Mr. Miller, over here, shouted one of the reporters. Daniel, is it true you're taking over the Greystone project completely? Another asked. He grinned, lifting his glass slightly toward the crowd. Greystone and Miller Enterprises, a partnership for the future. Behind him, Vanessa leaned in, whispering sweetly, perfect delivery, baby. Cameras snapped again, the two of them framed like a royal couple. But amid the applause, whispers began rippling quietly through the crowd. That's his new girlfriend? One woman murmured. Already? Didn't his wife just... Ex-wife? Someone corrected. She signed last week. Daniel heard the murmurs but pretended not to. His mother, Evelyn Miller, approached with a dazzling smile, pearls gleaming around her neck. Now this, she said proudly, is the image of a real man. No emotional baggage, no distractions. You're finally leading your life the right way. Daniel chuckled. You sound like my PR manager. Evelyn smirked. She's not wrong. Vanessa laughed softly beside them, but something about her eyes flickered a quiet need for control, for confirmation that she was the new queen of this empire. The lights dimmed as the host took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Miller Enterprises' annual charity gala. Tonight we celebrate success, partnership, and vision. Applause. Applause. Daniel basked in it, every clap a note in the symphony of his pride. He leaned close to Vanessa. Tomorrow, the Greystone deal closes. Then we're untouchable. Vanessa smiled, her hand brushing against his. To the future. They raised their glasses, the bubbles in the champagne rising like promises, and then a hush. The crowd's attention shifted. Heads turned. A wave of murmurs spread across the room like wind before a storm. Because walking through the doors, calm, poised, and radiant, was Clara. She moved slowly but confidently, every step deliberate. Her sleek black maternity gown shimmered under the lights, elegant but simple. The diamond bracelet on her wrist, a gift from Daniel years ago, glimmered faintly, catching the eyes of every camera in the room. Someone whispered, "That's her." Another said, "Didn't they divorce?" Even the host, standing on stage, faltered mid-sentence. "Mrs. Miller?" he began awkwardly. Clara smiled politely and corrected him. "Ex-Mrs. Miller," she said, her voice calm but carrying through the entire hall. A ripple of soft gasps followed. Daniel froze. The champagne glass in his, a hand stopped midair. Vanessa's smile vanished. Evelyn's expression hardened instantly, her proud face twisting with discomfort. Clara's eyes met Daniel's steady, unreadable. No anger, no sadness, just quiet certainty. She walked straight past the cameras, ignoring the whispers and flashes. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, echoing through the hall like a metronome marking the countdown to something inevitable. At the far end of the room, a group of executives from Greystone stood near the partnership banner, a large glowing logo reading Greystone x Miller Enterprises. Clara approached them gracefully, pulling an elegant white envelope from her clutch. She handed it to one of the executives, Mr. Hayes, the head of operations. He nodded knowingly, almost respectfully, before sliding the envelope into his jacket. Clara leaned in slightly and whispered, "That's the final copy of the termination order. Make sure legal has it on standby for tomorrow's press conference." He smiled faintly, then turned to glance at Daniel across the room. The two men's eyes met. Daniel frowned, confused. Clara straightened up, offered a polite smile, and turned to leave. As she passed Daniel, she paused just long enough to murmur softly, "Don't worry, Daniel. You'll understand soon." Then she walked out, leaving silence behind her so thick it muted even the music. Vanessa clutched Daniel's arm tightly. "What was that?" she whispered. Why were Greystone's people smiling at her? Daniel blinked, his pulse racing. "What are you talking about?" She nodded toward the executives. "Look, they're talking to her lawyer. The same one who handled your divorce." Daniel's expression shifted, first confusion, then unease. The cameras clicked again, catching his forced smile, but his eyes betrayed him. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. He turned back toward the stage, trying to compose himself, but the music that resumed now sounded distant, hollow. Vanessa whispered again, voice low and tight. "Daniel, what if she's not done with you?" He forced a laugh, too loud, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. "She's just bitter. She has nothing left to take." But across the room, under the glowing lights of the banner, the Greystone logo flickered once, twice, before stabilizing again. It looked almost alive, like a silent warning. Clara stepped into the cool night air outside, the city lights reflecting off her car's windows. She exhaled deeply, one hand resting over her belly. Michael's voice echoed faintly in her mind. Once he signs, everything changes. She looked back at the glowing building behind her. "Let the show go on," she whispered. Inside, Daniel lifted his champagne glass again, forcing a smile, unaware that the next contract he'd sign would be the one that destroyed him. The sound of applause filled the air as Daniel Miller strode to the podium. Bright spotlights beamed down on him, bouncing off the silver microphones and the giant LED screen behind him that displayed the words, "Miller Enterprises X Greystone Constructions, the future of innovation." He flashed his perfect smile, adjusting his cufflinks as photographers captured every angle. He looked untouchable, confident, composed, and every bit the man he had fought to become. "Good morning, everyone," Daniel began, his voice carrying over the murmurs of the room. "Today marks the partnership that defines the next decade. Together, Miller Enterprises and Greystone will build a legacy unlike anything the construction industry has ever seen." Applause thundered again. Investors nodded approvingly. Vanessa, sitting in the front row, smiled up at him with pride, the picture of loyalty and elegance. Daniel's parents, Evelyn and Richard, sat nearby, glowing with satisfaction. Their son finally recognized, finally respected. But behind the applause, something felt off. A faint tension rippled through the air, invisible but sharp, like the calm before a storm. As Daniel continued his speech, the double doors at the back of the room swung open with a sharp echo. Every head turned. Walking in were three people in tailored suits led by Michael Ross, holding a black folder. His calm, professional demeanor contrasted with the sudden confusion spreading across the room. Daniel paused, his smile faltering slightly. "Excuse me, sir," he said, forcing a light laugh. "This is a closed press event. You must be—" Michael spoke firmly, cutting through the noise. "Effective immediately, Greystone Constructions terminates all partnership agreements with Miller Enterprises under Clause 17 ethical breach and conduct violation." The room fell silent. Cameras stopped clicking. Reporters exchanged stunned looks. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Daniel blinked. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" Michael opened the folder, reading clearly for everyone to hear. "Per the ethics clause outlined in your contract, Greystone retains the right to withdraw from all deals should any partner engage in conduct that could damage the company's public image or integrity. Evidence has been provided to confirm such conduct." Daniel's expression hardened. "What evidence?" Michael nodded toward the screen behind him. "Allow me to show you." The LED screen flickered, and the slideshow abruptly stopped. The Greystone logo vanished, replaced by a paused video thumbnail. Then it began to play. The room went silent as the footage appeared. Daniel, grabbing Clara's wrist at his family dinner, dragging her in front of everyone, her face pale with humiliation. The recording caught every sound. Evelyn's mocking laughter, Daniel's words, "Say thank you to everyone for their support." A wave of murmurs erupted through the room. Someone gasped. A reporter whispered, "That's his pregnant wife." Another added, "Ex-wife. I remember the divorce filing last week." Daniel's voice cracked with fury. "Where did you get that footage?" Michael's answer was calm but firm. "From your own family, Mr. Miller. It seems your sister-in-law was very proud of the moment. She posted it to her private circle." "A mistake." Daniel's face turned red. "And whose authority is this coming from?" he demanded. Michael closed the folder slowly, his eyes locked on him. "On the CEO's authority." The audience stirred confusion, curiosity, disbelief mixing into one collective breath. Daniel scoffed. "Then where is this so-called CEO? I'll speak to them myself." The sound of heels clicking echoed from the hallway. A hush swept across the room. The doors opened again, and there she was, Clara. She stepped in gracefully, dressed in a navy blue power suit that framed her growing belly, her hair sleek, her expression calm and commanding. Every head turned. Reporters fumbled for their cameras. Vanessa froze, her champagne-colored blouse trembling slightly under the weight of the moment. Clara's eyes found Daniel's. He looked as if he'd seen a ghost. "You." But she kept walking, each step deliberate, slow, echoing against the polished marble floor. She stopped right beside him at the podium. Her presence filled the room. Even the lights seemed to bend toward her. Michael stepped aside respectfully, giving her the floor. She turned to the crowd, her voice smooth and composed. "Good morning. I apologize for the interruption. My name is Clara Gray. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Greystone Constructions." The words dropped like a thunderclap. Gasps rippled through the audience. Cameras flashed wildly. Someone whispered, "Gray? As in Greystone?" Daniel's lips parted in shock. You're Clara Gray?" His voice trailed off. "I thought C. Gray was an assistant." She looked at him, eyes cold but steady. "Surprised? You shouldn't be. You told me once that I should build my own foundation." The irony hit him like a punch. She reached into her folder and placed a document on the podium. "This," she said, tapping it lightly, "is your termination notice. Effective immediately, Miller Enterprises is no longer a partner of Greystone. All project access, funding, and joint resources are revoked." Daniel's breath hitched. "You can't." "I can," she interrupted calmly. "And I already have." He tried to speak, but no sound came out. The weight of her calm composure made him crumble in front of the entire room. Cameras captured every second: the betrayed husband, the betrayed CEO, the betrayed ego. Clara stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "Hello, Mr. Miller. I believe this is your last meeting in my boardroom." Her tone was polite, but her eyes burned with quiet justice. She turned to the cameras and said gently, "That concludes today's announcement." Then she turned and began to walk out, leaving chaos behind her. But as Daniel's world collapsed, one file on the projector still remained open, labeled "Pending Legal Transfer, Miller Enterprises Holdings." The storm wasn't over. It had only begun. The sound of camera shutters filled the room like gunfire as Clara walked away. Flashes exploded in Daniel's face as reporters shouted over one another. Questions, disbelief, accusations all blending into chaos. "Miss Gray, were you always the CEO of Greystone?" "Mr. Miller, did you know your wife owned the company? Is this a takeover or revenge?" Daniel stood frozen behind the podium, his face pale, sweat forming at his temples. His hand gripped the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles turned white. His confident smile was gone. "Turn those cameras off," he barked, voice cracking. But no one listened. As Clara reached the door, Michael Ross stepped back to the podium, placing a folder on the table. "For full transparency," he announced, "Greystone Constructions has operated under the leadership of Miss Clara Gray for the last 7 years. These are official ownership and registration documents confirmed by the Department of Corporate Affairs." He opened the folder. Inside were the papers signed, stamped, irrefutable. Clara's name gleamed under the header, Chief Executive Officer, Greystone Constructions. The flashes intensified. Reporters gasped audibly. Daniel's parents, Evelyn and Richard, sat stunned in the front row. Evelyn's manicured hand covered her mouth. Richard leaned forward, whispering, "My God!" She owned it all. Vanessa, seated beside them, shifted uneasily. Her perfect smile had vanished. Slowly, without drawing attention, she stood up, slipped her purse from under the chair, and began edging toward the door. No one stopped her. Daniel's eyes darted between the documents and the crowd. You tricked me," he stammered, voice trembling with fury, shouting at Clara's retreating back. Clara paused at the door, her back still to him. He slammed his palm against the table. "You hid everything from me. You made me think that I was small?" She cut in, her voice clear and carrying across the room without her even turning. "That I needed you to be whole?" Her voice was calm, but her words carried the weight of every sleepless night she had spent building his future while he mocked her dreams. Daniel tried to gather himself. You planned this from the start?" Clara shook her head, still not looking at him. "No. I planned to build something lasting. You planned to destroy it with your arrogance." The room went quiet, save for the rapid clicks of cameras. Evelyn stood suddenly, her voice sharp. "Clara, you can't do this. Daniel is family." Clara finally turned her head slightly, her tone icy but polite. "No, Mrs. Miller. He made sure I wasn't family the night he handed me divorce papers." The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. Even the reporters paused for a second, cameras hovering midair. Clara then looked at Michael, nodded once, and walked out. Two security guards appeared by the door, tall, calm, professional. Daniel took a step forward, panic now replacing pride. "Clara, wait, please, don't do this. I'll lose everything." Her voice didn't waver as the door hissed shut. One guard placed a hand gently on Daniel's shoulder. "Sir, we need to escort you out." Daniel jerked away, but they didn't relent. The crowd parted as he was guided toward the door, his once proud stride replaced with desperate stumbles. Cameras followed him the whole way. Reporters whispered words like collapse, karma, and divorce revenge. He paused at the door, looking back at the podium one last time. "You can't build anything without me." The empty podium was his only answer. The doors closed behind him. The room erupted, questions, flashes, chaos. Reporters swarmed Michael, microphones reaching toward him. "Mr. Ross, was this revenge? Did you plan this after the divorce? Do you have a message for other women watching this?" Michael smiled faintly. "My client's message," he said softly, "is that no one should mistake kindness for weakness." The cameras exploded again, the image of him standing calm amid chaos freezing into history. As security locked the doors behind Daniel, Evelyn sank back into her chair, speechless. Across the room, one of the journalists whispered to another, "She just destroyed him with dignity." Michael leaned closer to his team, speaking quietly. "It's done." His gaze shifted to the projector screen, still glowing behind him, a folder labeled Miller Enterprises Holdings Pending Legal Transfer. He turned toward his associate. "Prepare the next move." Foreshadowing line. Because taking back her power wasn't the end, it was only the beginning of reclaiming everything Daniel once took for granted. The television blared inside a small, dimly lit apartment. The once proud Daniel Miller sat slouched on a worn-out couch, his hair unkempt, his shirt wrinkled. The blinds were half closed, the air stale, the light dull. His hands trembled as he held the remote, flipping through news channels that all said the same thing. Miller Enterprises collapses after $9 billion deal withdrawal. Scandal rocks business elite. CEO's ex-wife secretly owned Greystone Constructions. From power to pity, Daniel Miller's empire crumbles under betrayal of his own making. Every headline struck him like a knife. He muted the sound but couldn't escape the images, the press conferences, the investors walking away, the logo of his company being taken down from the building that once bore his name. A reporter's voice echoed faintly through the muted screen. Sources confirm that Miller Enterprises has filed for bankruptcy and all assets are under liquidation review. Greystone Constructions, led by CEO Clara Gray, has officially withdrawn all ties. Daniel leaned forward, pressing his palms against his face. His phone vibrated messages from former associates, investors, and journalists asking for comments. He ignored them all. Then came the worst of it. Vanessa's face appeared on the television, speaking confidently in a live interview. She looked calm, polished, the same charm she once used on him, now turned against him. Daniel made his own choices, she said sweetly to the camera. I warned him not to underestimate Greystone's CEO. He just never listened. I hope he finds peace. Her words were daggers wrapped in silk. Daniel stared blankly, the realization cutting deep. Even Vanessa had abandoned him. He turned off the TV. Silence filled the room. On the table in front of him lay the remnants of what used to be his life: unopened mail, overdue notices, and a newspaper folded open to a photo of Clara at a construction site, smiling gently beside new recruits. She looked at peace, radiant. He picked up the paper, tracing her image with his thumb, whispering hoarsely, "You really did it." His eyes filled with tears, not from anger, but from something closer to regret. For the first time, he saw her not as the woman who embarrassed him, but as the woman who built everything he took for granted. Meanwhile, across town, the morning sunlight filtered through the trees of Evercrest Memorial Park. Clara stood quietly at her father's grave, the breeze carrying the soft rustle of leaves. She wore a simple cream coat, no jewelry, no fanfare, just the calm confidence of a woman who had survived the storm. A small bouquet of lilies rested in her hand. She knelt, placing them gently before the marble headstone engraved with her father's name, Thomas Gray. Build on truth, not arrogance. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. You told me to build on truth, Daddy, and I did. I just didn't realize the truth would have to break me first. For a long moment she stood there, eyes glistening not from sadness but release. Behind her, footsteps approached softly. Michael Ross, her lawyer and lifelong friend, stood holding an umbrella, though the weather was clear, as if his presence was less about protection and more about quiet loyalty. He smiled faintly. You know, he said gently, you could rebuild even bigger now. The world finally knows who you are. Investors would line up just to work with you. Clara turned toward him, her expression calm. I don't need bigger, she said. Just better. He nodded with quiet respect. Then what comes next? He asked. She looked up at the horizon, the sunlight touching her face. Peace. That's enough for me. Later that night, Clara sat alone in her office, overlooking the fauna-clad, glowing city skyline. Her reflection merged with the lights outside, a woman once broken, now whole. Her phone buzzed on the desk. She hesitated, then reached for it. The screen lit up. Daniel Miller text message. Please, forgive me. She stared at it for a long time, the seconds stretching like minutes. Her fingers hovered over the phone, and then, quietly, she pressed delete. She didn't read the rest. She didn't need to. Because forgiveness wasn't about him anymore. It was about her. Outside, rain began to fall, light, cleansing rain, the kind that made the city glow softer. Clara stood, moving toward the window, one hand resting gently over her belly. The storm that once defined her life was gone, now replaced by calm, by purpose. Michael's words echoed faintly in her mind. You could rebuild even bigger. She smiled softly to herself. No, she whispered. I'll rebuild stronger. Her reflection smiled back, a woman reborn, not through revenge, but through truth. In a small apartment across town, Daniel's phone buzzed again. Message delivered. He waited, staring at it, hoping for 3 little dots that never appeared. Then the screen went dark. The silence that followed was absolute. And somewhere in the quiet of that night, as Clara turned from her window and Daniel faced his emptiness, the world began to whisper her name, not as a woman wronged, but as a woman who rose. The roar of engines broke the still morning air. Cranes lifted steel beams against the pale sunrise, sparks flying as welders worked in rhythm. The ground buzzed with life, laughter, hammering, and the deep hum of rebuilding. A large signboard stood proudly at the entrance. Greystone Foundations, building with integrity. The sunlight glinted off the metal letters, as if blessing a new beginning. And walking through it all, calm and composed, was Clara Gray. She wore a simple white hard hat, her tailored coat fluttering in the morning breeze. The workers greeted her with respect, smiles spreading across tired faces. Morning, Miss Gray, one called out. Morning, she replied warmly, her voice gentle but strong. Each step she took was steady, grounded. No longer the quiet woman behind someone else's name, she was the name. She stopped near the center of the site, where the first foundation stone had been laid. Fresh concrete glistened in the light, and her reflection shimmered faintly upon its surface. Her hand rested instinctively on her belly, a silent acknowledgement of the life she carried and the strength that had carried her. The sound of construction faded slightly, replaced by a stillness in her chest piece, not emptiness. She closed her eyes, breathing in the cool air. For a moment, memories flickered. Daniel's laughter at their early dinners, his first failed deal, the night he'd called her, the reason he'd make it, then the shift, his pride, the humiliation, the Ensfime, divorce papers on the table. All of it played like distant echoes now. But she no longer hurt. Because pain had done its work, it had rebuilt her. A young foreman approached, clipboard in hand. "Ma'am," he said respectfully, "the media wants to do a feature on Greystone's new community program. They said your story has inspired women across the country." Clara smiled faintly. "Tell them it's not just my story," she said. "It's every woman who learned to stand after being told to kneel." He nodded, visibly moved, then walked off to relay her words. She looked back toward the rising skyline, her city, her company, her legacy. The light hit her face just right, warm and golden, illuminating the calm in her eyes. Far across town, in a dim apartment filled with silence, Daniel Miller sat alone on his couch, staring at the flickering television. The morning news anchor's voice played softly. Greystone Foundations launches new initiative, CEO Clara Gray inspires women nationwide with her story of resilience and rebirth. Her face appeared on the screen, smiling as she shook hands with young architects and engineers, women who looked at her with admiration. Daniel leaned forward, his unshaven face pale in the screen's glow. He whispered, voice breaking, "She was the foundation all along." His reflection stared back at him hollow, regretful, and utterly alone. Back at the construction site, Clara lifted her gaze toward the sunrise. A gust of wind carried dust and light around her, a soft halo of gold. In that moment, she whispered not to the wind, not to Daniel, but to herself. Some things don't break, they transform. The camera pulled back, showing the vast site, the workers, the rising building, and the banner that fluttered above it all. Greystone Foundations, building what lasts. As the screen faded to gold, a new voiceover hinted softly, "Every ending builds the ground for something greater." And for Clara Gray, this was only the beginning of her legacy.